hoping that we were under the cover of darkness. The Sandinistas were all over us. They were firing flares, trying to identify us in the horizon. When that didn't work, they started doing what's called recon by fire, where you shoot into a particular area and stop and hope that they shoot back. That was 48 hours of no sleep, 48 hours of ups and downs of adrenaline, but I got my guys back. All 8 of them came back home. You know, growing up in Cuba, when I was in 7, 8, 9 kind of years, where started really peaceful. It was a wonderful existence. My dad had his business. I had a horse before I had a bicycle, BB gun at the age of 6. So it was good life. But then the revolution started. And I think that the first really indelible memory of that whole thing was a huge firefight that happened right in front of my house. When my parents were gone, I was there with a nanny. And I went up to the window to see, and I actually saw the carnage and also the noise from guns being fired literally 2 feet underneath where I was standing. So that kind of started the shock of what we were getting into with the revolution. Unfortunately, we all had high hopes about the revolution, but that changed very quickly. And I think that the other memories that jump out from childhood are seeing how quickly the oppression and the persecution of the political dissenters, the indoctrinations in schools. I mean, they literally told us that we had to inform on our parents if we ever heard them talking bad about the revolution. And I think to top it off, before leaving the United States was one of our trips to Havana, seeing at the park 3 men hanging from trees by their necks with signs that said, "We're counter-revolutionaries." The reality of Cuba is that it is one of the longest and most oppressive regimes left in the world. Most Americans that do travel to Havana go to the nice places that are open for them, and it's still third world, but it's it's got the historical aspects of it and beautiful people walking around. What most people do not see is the day-to-day lack of food, lack of safety, the persecutions that still exist. Television and radios are completely controlled. All the news that they get now, thanks to the internet, is usually clandestine. Importing thumb drives into Cuba is a big adventure, because that's how they carry modern movies and books and stuff like that. So between the people that have died trying to get out of Cuba to come here, and the people that the Castros either imprisoned and or killed are in the tens of thousands, if not hundreds. I was put on an airplane at the age of 10, but I do not remember anything from after I said goodbye to them until I landed in Miami. I don't remember the flight. I don't remember where I sat. Shortly thereafter, I was sent to Pueblo, Colorado, so I was on a second airplane, and to Denver, and driving with a priest through the Rockies, going down to Pueblo is something that is unforgettable. When my parents finally came out about 8 months later, we were sub-poverty for the first 3 or 4 years in the United States, but we were free. We felt free. Late in high school, early junior college, I grew a conscience and a debt of honor to this country. So I enlisted in an elite pararescue unit of the Air Force, because I wanted to go to Vietnam. That was my way of saying, I'm going to pay back this country for what they did for me and my family. Unfortunately, by the time that I got my beret, at the end, Vietnam was literally in this last few months. So I was doing a lot of training and a lot of cool stuff, but not real operations. I wasn't making a difference. So that's when I applied to the agency in the late 70s, and they first hired me on contract to be a medic, because pararescue are primarily combat medics. And I was riding rescue in Metro Miami, also with the fire department. So they brought me on board. They would fly me out for a couple of weeks. They got to know me, and everything was a good experience. But then when Reagan came in and took over and declared the war on communism, he started with Nicaragua. And he started a covert program that ended up being called the Contras. The sad thing is that because of the post-Vietnam War attrition that both the military and the agencies suffered, CIA did not have a single native Spanish-speaking person with military background, with special military background. So they scrambled to find out where the heck I was at after several months, and that was my full admission. Now I was a full-time member of that agency. The first close encounter, and the one that resonates really well, was my first firefight when I was with the Contras. Very early on, going to one of the camps, you got to understand there's no borders there that are delineated. You're somewhere between Nicaragua and Honduras. And as soon as I arrived in my truck full of equipment, we got lit up by the Sandinistas just on the other side of the bushes. So got to be a pretty good scrimmage. It was probably only 10 or 15 minutes, but it felt like an hour and a half. And that was the first time that I got shot at in anger, and first time I shot at with anger. Subsequently that night, we had mortars, and we did a mortar attack on their camp, and they never bothered us again. But I think the hairiest as far as aftershock, is I was in the Philippines. We were working against the New People's Army, and they were using this team called Sparrows. And Sparrows were designated assassins. Their modus operandi is they carry a .45 caliber pistol, 1911 A1, in their pants, no holster, safety off, and they hold it with their left hand. And what they would do is they would come behind the victim or in front of the victim, pop the gun out, shoot, put it back, and people would just be looking at who got shot. They were ghosts. Nobody could ever identify them. So we've been working with them. This was in Davao, so it was outside of Manila. We had gone to dinner, and we were coming out. It was 6 of us. And as we walk out, nobody else noticed. There was these 3 guys standing there about 20 yards from us at that. And as soon as we came out, they got in three formation. The guy in the center made eye contact with us. Both guys on the outside had their hands in their pants. So I drew my weapon, and of course, when adrenaline kicks in, you get tunnel vision, you get auditory exclusion. I didn't know anything else that was going on in the world except these 3 guys that were obviously meaning us harm. Some people may question the validity of it. I have no doubt in my mind, and neither does my partner, because when we both drew our weapons and pointed at these guys, they didn't even blink. These guys didn't skip a beat. They just kept walking at us and doing like, we'll get you next time kind of look. Between training and everything else, you develop a zone that you have to get into when you face these kind of things. And we were in the zone.
So, astonishingly, bin Laden lived here with almost no security.
Starting the bin Laden task force in early 1996 with Mike Scheuer was one of the high points of my career, because it was one of my few headquarters assignments. I had just gotten my GS-15 shortly before, which is our colonel rank. And now from headquarters end, I saw what we are capable of doing when we are empowered to do so. And the example that I love to give is within 6 months after starting the bin Laden task force, we had increased our intelligence on bin Laden tenfold, if not more. We knew from overhead, from unilateral sources, from volunteers, walk-ins, you name it, and liaison services are helping us, that he was intent in doing harm to the United States and the American people. The saga of bin Laden starts with him in Khartoum, and that was a top place time that we knew where he was at, we knew what he was doing. He felt very comfortable there because he was protected by the local, very, very corrupt regime. The man that was doing surveillance on him was Billy Waugh. So Billy used to do a couple of things. One, he would just blatantly run around the compound where bin Laden was. Billy had vision into bin Laden's routine down to what he had for breakfast. And one time during one of his runs, he came right upon bin Laden. But the political will was never there to preempt his actions. And yes, after the coal, there was a rise in the interest. After the embassy bombings, there was a rise in the interest. We were going after him, but by then he was in Afghanistan. And people don't understand. I do, because as a rescue person, I've found people in the ocean. I have found people in the mountains. It is very difficult to find somebody, even when they want you to find them. Imagine somebody who doesn't want to be found. So we knew that he was in Kandahar, or that he was here, that wherever the hell, different places that he was at, living in a cave. And we really did not have access to him directly or his nomenclature. The people that ran, they were all under the same auspices. Imagine if we would have taken bin Laden down in 1997 or 98. The USS Cole would have not been attacked. Our twin embassies in Africa would have not been simultaneously blown up. And maybe even 9/11 might have been avoided. One of the things that I've always said, you cannot run military or intelligence operations through a political optic. You have to be devout of politics and focus on what needs to be done to protect your country and the people they're in. The variety of the work that I did and the different places that I did do give you some in-depth, but when you're going through your career, it's like driving in a car 100 miles an hour. You're seeing everything that's going on, but it's almost a blur. You don't have time for introspection. Later on in life, especially writing the book, I had time for introspection. We say God and country and family. Well, a lot of times you got to say family, God, and country, or family, country, and God, because ours is a very, very demanding profession that calls for a lot of sacrifices. You have to understand that when Johnny's father, who works at the car dealer, has a real bad day, it means he didn't sell any cars. When one of us has a real bad day, we either lost a colleague, or we lost an asset, or we blew an operation. And coming home with that, you have to marry well. I was blessed with the fact that my wife lived under communism for longer than I did, and she understood that my sacrifices were meant to fight something that she believed in fighting. Let them share just enough so they understand the stresses that you are under, the responsibilities, the moral responsibilities that you're under, and that helps you plan your life towards the future. My kids have all grown up very well immersed in that. Everything from taking care of your family to being true to your friends, taking care of your colleagues, finding purpose is very important. I am going to try to retire now, but I think that's the path that gives you the most bang for your effort, is having a purpose, having a goal that is for a higher cause than just monetary benefits in the bank.